All right, here we are. So today I have with me Gillian Armstrong, who's our Grants and Communications Manager. Gillian, how are you today?
Good, feeling good. How are you?
Feeling good. Excellent. I am also feeling good. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Dominique Jones, and I'm the Executive Director, and we both work for the County Foundation, your local community foundation. So today we are going to be presenting a very exciting webinar to fill everybody in on how to navigate our funds and grants because we realized that this has changed a lot over the last couple of years and we thought, let's provide some more information to our lovely organizations about accessing funds. So I'm just going
Yeah,
to,
they're a little bit of a mystery sometimes.
yeah, they can be. So we're going to try and take the mystery out of that. Here we are. All right. So as mentioned, we're from the County Foundation, which is your local community foundation in Prince Edward County. And today we're going to be talking about navigating our funds and receiving financial support through the Community Foundation.
So today we're going to be covering a couple sort of high-level topics on our funds. We're going to start with talking about who we are and our core activities as a community foundation. We're going to answer the question, what is a fund? What does that even mean? What is the benefit of giving through the county foundation? Why do donors want to work with us or establish funds? We're going to cover what different kind of disbursements look like, an overview of our current grant programs. We'll also be discussing what a donor advised fund is. That's one of our most common types of funds. And then we're going to go into kind of the details of what it looks like to seek financial support from a donor advised fund and what that sort of looks like on the back end for us, as well as covering a new exciting addition to our work with donors and organizations, which is an expression of interest form.
Lots to cover. So, who are we? As mentioned, we are the County Foundation, and we're a local community foundation that is based in Prince Edward County. Our aim is to create a vibrant and inclusive community, and our vital signs data identifies needs in the community, and we use this information to help direct donations where they can have the greatest impact on our well-being. We're one of 207 community foundations across Canada. This is a growing movement, and we offer collaborative leadership and funding to support initiatives that benefit Prince Edward County. And what do we do, Gillian? What does this
Oh,
look
well,
like?
well, one thing I'll point out is that actually I checked the other day and apparently we're at 208 community foundations. So the
Wow,
number continues to grow in the national network. So the work that we do as a community foundation, so we have three major kind of core activities that we focus on. One is vital signs data. And so we produce vital signs reports to inform decision making related to community well-being. So anyone who's familiar with vital signs, it's a free data bank. And then we produce also different reports on that data just to kind of collect that information to distill it down into, actionable steps. Then there is our funds and our grants. So funds is obviously the focus of our webinar today. And so this work it involves creating funds for charitable purposes and helping to distribute grants in our community. So I think a lot of people are familiar with the grant side, but maybe not so much the fund side. And then lastly, collaborative actions. We work with partners to support positive community-led action in Prince Edward County.
awesome. So the question that we get asked quite often is, what is a fund? And we use this term quite often. So we thought it would be great to start with a bit of a definition here and what it looks like. So a fund is a sum of money that has been saved or made available for a particular purpose. And in this particular case, the county foundation creates and establishes funds for charitable purposes. So what does that look like exactly? So someone gives money to the foundation. We typically call them a donor or a donation. And that money is then saved and invested over time in a vehicle that's called a fund. And then that fund distributes money through grants, and that fund provides benefit from that gift for many years. So it's something where instead of just trickling in and trickling out in one go, it creates greater impact because it can last a number of years and a number of applicants can benefit from it.
So, the big question that I think we get asked also, in addition to what is a fund, is why would a donor choose to give money through the county foundation? I think most of us, have given a donation in our life and are familiar with that process and what it looks like. So you might kind of wonder, well, like if people can just give directly to charities themselves, then what's sort of the point of the foundation? What do you do? What do you offer? So some of the reasons that donors work with us, and this can come in all different shapes and sizes. So we handle all the setup and administration of the fund, particularly if someone's giving a lot of money over a variety of different causes and organizations. It can be nice and simple for them to kind of facilitate that giving in one place. They potentially, get one tax receipt. Their accountant loves them for that. So it makes it nice and simple. And then on the administrative side, we then take care of all the sort of work of getting that money out into the community. So in some cases, they are also seeking guidance and expertise on their giving. Uh, One major part of our work, as I mentioned, is vital signs data. So we collect that information on sort of what's happening locally in the community, where are the gaps, where are the needs. And we also, facilitate a lot of different grant programs and are familiar about kind of what are the areas where there's a lot of attention and maybe some areas where there's less attention, and so can kind of facilitate those conversations based off of donors' interests. They may have a preference also to handle their giving anonymously. So then we become kind of that third party, sort of that go-between between organizations and that donor. They want to be strategic and develop a long-term plan for giving back. So as we mentioned, sometimes that involves setting up a fund that's going to disperse, grants over a longer period of time. But it can also look like someone who's interested in giving a bequest or a gift through their estate. So we can have longer conversations around sort of what that looks like. And then lastly, leverage collective growth and impact to make their giving go further. And so we'll get into a little bit more detail about what that means in the next slide.
That's great. I'll also mention just on this point here, Gillian was going over all the reasons why a donor might work with us. I'll just also highlight that there's a benefit to the charity or the organization as well. If we're doing the administration, the charitable receipt, then that charity is just benefiting from the gift. They don't have to worry about being burdened with the back end side of receipting it to the CRA and doing all the auditing and bookkeeping requirements. They just receive that gift in and they're able to complete their project or use it for their mandate. So sometimes, especially with those smaller charities and organizations that don't have as much resources or people power, that's a really great gift for them because they're just able to take the finances and run with it without having to worry about all the back end. So, a rising tide lifts all ships. We are in a community that is surrounded by water, so you'll often hear us use water analogies and quotes, and this is one that we use quite often. And you may be familiar with that expression, and our funds work in a very similar way. So a donor, when they're setting up a fund, they can establish one of their own, or they can contribute to an existing one. And that really is based on preference and also the size of the gift that they're looking to give. So if somebody's looking to do a donation of a couple $100s, it probably makes sense to donate into a vehicle that already exists. If somebody's looking for that larger tax receipt or that larger benefit, then they may be interested in starting a fund. Once that money is in a fund, the money from the donor is pooled with other funds. So again, pool, we're using some more water references there, ha ha ha. And what I mean when we're pooling it together, that means that we are investing it together. So over time, the funds that we manage are invested and they continue to grow with interest, income, and dividends. And that original gift from the donor can grow to a higher amount than it could on its own. Each fund creates that shared benefit. The great thing about pooling all these gifts together is that we are able to access better quality investment vehicles like mutual funds because the sum of all of those parts is a greater number than the individual funds themselves. So as our funds continue to grow, this creates more impact over a longer period of time for our community. Over to you, Gillian.
Okay, and so, a donor comes to us, they've either contributed to a fund or they have established their own fund, and, now it's time to get that money back out into the community. And so there are kind of two main ways that that funding is dispersed back into the community. And so one method is through scholarships and bursaries. We often lovingly say that our bursaries are, somewhat of a gateway for donors looking to get acquainted with us, to kind of have a bit of a test run of what it's like to work with us. And so this is obviously focused though on education. Scholarships are typically related to sort of like academics, while bursaries are focused on, you know, anything else that falls sort of outside of just academics. So that could be sort of like interest in community service. It could be, interest in leadership opportunities, things like that. And then grants on that side, grants in many ways is a donation. And so like grants can kind of have a couple different shapes and sizes. So we'll get into the details about that. But that's probably one of the things that people are most familiar with our work. And so they're a little bit more complicated, but generally donors will identify either specific organizations or specific areas that they want the grants to be directed towards. And so that can include kind of categories like they're passionate about healthcare or food security or poverty relief or maybe education in other ways. So it's kind of a little bit more plug and play. And so that's why we refer to them also as donor advised fund, as the donor has the voice in those conversations, and, have areas where they're interested in directing that support. So we just help facilitate what that looks like.
Great. So an overview of our grants. So let's do a very quick top-down overview of our well-known grant programs, just so that everybody's aware. And these are ones that we call public calls for applications. So this is when we are going to put out a notification. You'll probably see this in the newspapers and also our social media accounts, saying that we are looking for applications to these grant funds. And those funds are municipal community grants. So this is a fund that is funded by the municipality of the Corporation of Prince Edward, and it's administered by the County Foundation. So just so that everybody knows, we don't actually hold on to these funds. These funds exist with the municipality, but we support the paperwork side of it, the administration side. These grants tend to happen in the spring. It all depends on whether there's a new council that's been added in. Sometimes there's a little bit of a delay with budget and then it falls a little bit later in the spring. But if it's a current council, then you can probably expect to see these come out February, March of each year. So keep that in mind. And then we have the Huff Family Fund, which is one that we've been running for a number of years. This is one of our donor advised funds, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So this is where a fund has been established by the donor. It involves a public grants process. So that's that call for applications that I mentioned. And it's a little bit unique for this fund, but it makes sense because of the size of the gift. So the Huffs, for example, are looking to give out $250,000 a year. And for that amount of granting, we're looking for applications to assess. And then, really excitingly, we just also, oh, sorry, I should also mention that the Huff Family Fund is typically intake in the fall. This past year, we ran it towards the end of August. So that's when you're expecting to see that start with a deadline in September. And then our newest fund to enter the repertoire is the Vital Impact Fund. So this is a signature fund of the County Foundation, and this brings together our vital signs data and our granting work. So it's really looking to advance those pillars and themes of vital signs and try and move that data and those priorities forward. In terms of how this fund is funded, where the money comes from, a good portion of it is actually County Foundation money. So this is money that we have earned over the years and we've collected in a granting fund. And then we've also benefited from two estates that are funding directly into this granting stream because we thought that was the best way to get the money out into community. So at this point in time, really want to thank the Wynne Thomas estate and the Doug and Kathy McPherson estate. That's really helping to support those funds out into Prince Edward County, and that's $200,000 a year into community. And we offer that one in the late fall. So Vital Signs typically gets launched in October. And because this is a fund that ties so closely with Vital Signs, we wanted to make sure that that timing was close hand in hand.
Okay, so now that we've sort of done a recap of the, grant programs that I think most organizations who have applied for a grant through us would be familiar with, but sort of on the flip side, we have about 39 funds that we manage kind of in the background. Some people have received gifts. They may go, oh, well, I've received this letter that I've, received a donation from a fund from the county foundation. I'm not super familiar with it. Maybe you go to our website, start digging around and going like, oh, they have this fund listed under their list. But we didn't apply for this. It just kind of came out of the blue. And so that's what we mean about like, sometimes it's a bit of a mystery behind the scenes about how this happens. And so we want to pull back that curtain a bit and provide a little bit more context on sort of what that looks like. So as we've sort of already, alluded to, one of the funds that we are most popular for and that we work with donors on is a donor advised fund. And so in this case, the donor advises where they want to contribute. And some, will have a very clear idea about what they're looking to contribute towards, maybe a very specific focus or specific organizations that they're looking to give towards or areas that they're passionate about. Well, some donors will come and, maybe they've got a couple things in their back pocket of what they're thinking about, but they're really looking for some guidance on where their donation can kind of have the greatest impact within Prince Edward County.
Great. So let's go over what receiving a grant from a donor advised fund can look like. Oh, and apologies for a little bit of a text overlap. That must have been the way that this downloaded. But anyway, I'm hoping most of you can read that. I can sort of read it, so we'll go with that. So here's some examples of how they may work. So example number one, donor selects a specific charity to receive a grant and specifies that it's meant to be towards a particular project or program. So that could be very specific, and that's something that we do see from time to time. We also may see a donor that selects a particular charity to receive a grant, but it is unrestricted. So what that means is that the donor hasn't specified that they want it to go towards a particular area or project. They just want to give it to the organization because they love the work that you're doing and think that, here's another $5,000 or whatever that number is. Please continue doing your great work. Or a donor may have some charities or causes in mind, and causes could be, as Gillian alluded to earlier, maybe advancing education, it could be the arts, it could be food security projects, but they would like some advice based on vital signs data or our knowledge of the community needs in terms of choosing where to direct their giving. This is where we're just providing them with some more robust information, including our vital signs reports, giving them some more context to select from, but then the donor can provide a little bit more of an informed decision.
And so now that we've sort of, laid the groundwork of sort of what is a fund, what's a donor advised fund, what does that look like? So the question that a lot of organizations may have is, what does it actually look like to seek financial support from a donor advised fund? How do we access this mysterious funding? And so the County Foundation will guide donors looking for assistance in a variety of different ways. So as we've already mentioned, vital signs data and reports is a big part of that work that we do. We'll also look at our other grant programs and the unmet need. So most of our grant programs are oversubscribed. There is more applications for funding than there is funding available. So in some cases, we will discuss what were the projects or ideas that were not funded through some of our grant programs, and are there donors interested in stepping up potentially to, fill that gap? And then sharing annual reports of organizations that are in alignment with the donor's interests. So they may have a couple of ideas about, who they're looking to get to know, almost like dating. And so if you have an annual report as an organization, please send that to me and Dom, because like that is a huge tool in our wheelhouse of being able to share that information with donors and provide them that context about sort of the grand scheme of the work that you're doing in the community. And then we can help share that message with donors.
I'll just
And then
mention that digital copies of your annual reports are really appreciated because that's easier for us to share widely and have access to many staff. Paper is always great, don't get me wrong. It's good to reference and thumb through. But if we can keep a digital copy, that's easy to email to a donor and to circulate.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great point. And then, so before I get into kind of expressions of interest, one of the other ways that you may be familiar with or you've had experience with as an organization is that occasionally Dom and I will reach out to organizations directly and say, hey, like we have a donor who has expressed an interest in your organization, but they're looking to learn a little bit more. Is there a particular area that you're looking for funding for? Is there a program you really are in need of donors for, or maybe a piece of equipment that's started to sort of, hit the fritz and, would be helpful to replace? With that in mind, we decided to create sort of a new tool in our tool belt, which is an expression of interest form. So we are looking to hear directly from organizations, and the purpose being that we want to bring together the needs of organizations and link that more directly with our funds and the donors that we work with. So this is something that can be submitted through our website. It's something that you shouldn't be spending more than 15 minutes on. It's just a quick little summary of what you're looking for support for, and that can be shared with donors. So we'll go into a little bit more detail about what that process looks like now.
Perfect. So the expression of interest, we're very excited about this. It's a great way for you to communicate with us. And I'll start with saying, yes, you can fill out multiple ones. It can be for more than one. Just keep in mind that we may be in touch if you have more than one to figure out what your priority is. So to submit an expression of interest, your organization must be what we call a qualified donee, and that's as defined by the Income Tax Act through CRA. The most easily recognized example of what a qualified donee is a registered charity to receive funding from a donor advised fund. The reason for this is how we are established through CRA. So when we are granting gifts out to organizations, those organizations must be qualified donees. So when you submit an expression of interest, please keep in mind that that does not necessarily mean that your request will be funded. This is just a great way for you to communicate to us and our repertoire of donors. As Gillian mentioned in a previous slide, we have 39 funds and growing at the moment. So it's a great way to get that information across. There's also no specific deadline for an expression of interest or for when donors are going to be gifting out funds. This could happen at any point in time in the year. So in terms of best practice, as I mentioned, this is a new procedure for us, but I see it as an organization may want to fill this out once a year, maybe twice a year, just as emerging needs come up, and then we will circulate it with our donors. Keep in mind that it is ultimately the decision of the donor if they choose to support your organization, and they also may choose to only partially support your request. But at the end of the day, the aim for this is we're hoping to get some more money out to organizations that are creating great impact in our community. Organizations and projects can still receive support without submitting an expression of interest. Again, going back to a previous slide where we detailed the process and how donors work with us, a donor still may say, I really like working with X organization and I want to give them X amount of dollars. That organization may not have given us an expression of interest form, and that's fine. This is just a way to get more information and communication across. Please keep in mind that there also may be more follow-up with additional questions on behalf of the donor or from us at the County Foundation. So if you submit one, we may be in touch just with some more questions. Again, I'll just reiterate that this is a communication tool for us and for you.
Mhm. And so, with all that in mind, we have a couple sort of tips or best practices for submitting an expression of interest and what that process looks like. So you should really be considering this more of an elevator pitch, and that could be for your organization, for its programs and services, or what you are specifically looking for assistance with. This is not meant to be sort of us asking for another full application, as much as we love our grant programs, we know that they take a little bit more legwork, they take more time. And so this is not meant to be another version of that. It's supposed to be sort of a quick 15-minute, type out exactly what you're looking for and give kind of that high level kind of elevator pitch. And then if a donor is interested, they may have follow-up questions and there may be more conversations about what that means. But this isn't something that you should be spending more than 15 minutes on. It's also helpful to have a very direct ask so that donors can picture the tangible impact that they would be providing. And so, what I mean by that is that if there's something within your organization that you are like, oh, like if we really need some, arts and crafts supplies for this particular program to go ahead, or if we had this piece of equipment, then we could finally offer X program. If there's an area that's a very specific, tangible need for your organization, this can be something really helpful for donors to sort of wrap their minds around and go, okay, I understand that if I provide this, that X will happen and it will have this outcome. And, if a donor is just getting to know your organization, that can be sort of a good little, again, gateway to starting those conversations, to getting acquainted. And then they have an immediate idea of how they can have an impact on your organization, which is really helpful. And then lastly, we're kind of referring to expressions of interest as going fishing. So when you go fishing, you may not always get a bite, but you might be able to hook someone in enough where they're interested in learning more. So you may not, hear anything back from an expression of interest unless there's kind of those follow-up questions. And so again, this is not going to be the same process as people may be familiar with our grant programs where you submit something and then you hear back. Instead, you may only hear back if there's kind of those follow-ups and questions.
That's a great point. All right. Well, I hope that gave everyone a little bit more of an understanding of what a fund is, how donors interact with the county foundation, then, and of course, how the new expression of interest form works. So where do you find said form? So that form is available on our website. It's under the grants page. And if you go to funds, you'll see expression of interest form. And you're welcome to either do the online form or there's a PDF form that you can scan in or drop off to submit. Keep in mind that our funds are continuing to grow, evolve, and change, which is very exciting. But in order to keep up with that information, I would encourage everybody to join our newsletter. I promise that this newsletter is not overly cumbersome. We release one every other month, so it's 6 newsletters a year. There's usually a lot of information contained in it. It's amazing what we do within 2 months. And in order to join that newsletter, it's called The Pulse. You can find that on our website under News, Pulse Newsletter, and you can fill in your details and you'll be kept up to date with information. The other great way to stay on top of what's happening at the County Foundation with new funds or open call for grant applications is to follow our social media accounts. So we are on Instagram and Facebook. We also have a LinkedIn account as well. And we do advertise through the newspaper, so keep your eyes open for that. But I do know that with a newspaper, if you're not looking at it at that point in time and maybe you're on vacation, it does come and go. Whereas with social media, you can go back and look at that content again. So thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to reviewing your expressions of interest, don't we, Gillian?
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks so much. Okay. Perfect.